Hey, what is up? My name is Chris and welcome to Coding in Public. I'm really excited about this JavaScript part of this image slider. This was really fun to build out and to kind of think through the steps. And you'll see here, if you didn't see the last video, I did the CSS and the HTML, but as you click here, this is the finished project and it's actually up on my site. You can go look at it. And if you need the code, you can grab it from here or the description below. You can also jump back to the YouTube video. But if you come in this way, you'll see you just slide along. Get to the bottom, it switches all the way back over, and we set all this up last time with CSS. This time we're going to work on the JavaScript. Okay, so I'm going to jump over here. This is what we've got set up so far. Before we do too much, let's actually talk through what it's going to look like. I've got this Figma pulled up here. What we're going to end up doing here is loading all these images in a row, just like you saw earlier here, over this direction here, how they're stacked out that way. Because what we're going to do is just slide the entire container that they sit in to the left. So now the container's over here, which means the next image is showing. And then once again, same thing happens, same thing, and same thing. Now when you go back to the first one, normally it's just going to transition back this way and kind of jump awkwardly backwards. But we're going to do something to mitigate that by doubling the first and the last item, the first and last image in JavaScript. And I'll show you how we're going to do that in a moment. Now, when I showed you last time, I've got this JSON file as if you were to make a fetch to a server. We're going to write it that way, but rather than focusing on like setting that up, we're just going to pretend we're getting this back from a server, and it's pointing us to a URL, which is just these images in this image folder, and then giving us an alt tag for each of them as well. All right, but without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into our JavaScript file. We're going to kind of think through the steps we need to do first. I always find that's really helpful, especially when you've got something with even just a little bit of complexity. So before we do anything, we're going to need to load the images, or I guess we can call this fetch the images, because we're pretending we're getting this from a server. And once we get those, we'll do some other things. But let's start with that because we know that's what we need to do. So in order for this to work kind of in sequence, we're going to need to set this up as an async function, and we'll call this fetch images. And then we'll come in here and we're going to say await fetch, and we can use that await keyword since we used async up top, and then we're just going to grab our images.json. This would probably be like a URL that you're actually hitting, but like I said, we're just pretending we are, so we can kind of focus on the JavaScript handling all those sliding options. So we're going to get a response back from the server, or in this case from our file. And when we get that, let's do a few things. Let's first of all go ahead and say if it's not okay. So if response.okay, and when you look at responses you get back, they actually have this little okay parameter, or I guess key. And so they'll say false or true. So if it's not okay, then we're going to throw a new error, and this will just say network response was not okay. All right, perfect. Then, assuming that's not the case, we're going to come in here in response.json and pull it just like that. Okay, so we're going to come down here and write another then, and notice I'm not doing like a semicolon at the end. This is actually all connected like this, but just for easeability of reading, I'm splitting it up. So we're going to get data, which is just whatever was passed in, and we'll call it data here. We could call it an image array, whatever you want, but we'll just call it data. That's pretty normal. And we'll come in here, and the first thing we're going to do is grab the data, and we actually want to clone the first and last image. So again, let me kind of show you what this is going to look like. If I come in here and I clone this image, let's move it down, and then let's move this whole thing down this way. This is actually going to be the last image now in the array. And then I want to clone this image, and we're going to move this image all the way to the front. All right, so let me show you kind of what this is going to look like. So this is actually going to be the first image now. And as this whole slider area moves, we're going to actually start it right here. Let's zoom out and let me see if I can grab the whole thing. All right, there we go. And let's zoom in just a little bit more. And so we'll offset it like that. So this will be image number 1. This is the last image. It's a clone of the last image. Let's say we try to go to the previous image. Well, there wasn't a previous image, but we're going to clone it and put it there so that when we move, it'll actually come here. Then we'll remove the transition and jump everything over to this image right here. So it'll look like we're just sliding to the left. And then we'll just keep moving this way. Same thing, if we come over this way and we're moving this direction and we go to the last image, which is this one, and then we want to go right, well, there is nothing to the right, so we're going to have to clone it and provide it here. This is the first image in the array. If you remember, if I zoom out, it's this image right here. So we're going to go ahead and move as if that were there, because again, we're going to clone it there. Take the transition off, quickly move it over to here, and then continue on either direction. So we're going to use these cloned images to make it look like it's an infinite slider. So hopefully that visual kind of helps you. Now let's go ahead and clone the images so you can kind of see it in real time. So we're going to grab the data array that we got back and we're going to push onto it data, and then we're going to grab the 0 position. So by pushing it, that will add it to the end of the array. Then we're going to do the same thing to the front of the array, which isn't pull, although it kind of seems like it should be. It's unshift, right? And then we're going to say data, and then data.length. So we want the last image would be 1, but remember we just pushed the first image to the last image, so now we need to do -2. And then if we come in here and console.log data, let's go ahead and do that, and then run this fetch images down this way. And then I'll pull this up. And now we get this array with 8 images, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 1 again, and then 6 is at the beginning. So we clone the last one at the beginning and the first one at the end. So that's what we've done so far. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use this and we're going to actually populate the slider. So we'll show the slider. So first of all, let's come back in here and say we clone first and last image. Now let's go ahead and declare a variable up top here. So we'll say const slide equals document.querySelector slide. We're going to use this in several of the functions, so it makes sense just to declare it up top here. So what we're going to do is say slide.inner HTML is equal to data.map. So we're going to map over this data. We're going to pass each of the items to this process images. And then when we get it all back, we're going to .join it. I'll show you what that looks like here in just a second. In fact, let's go ahead and copy this down, comment this out, and then let's just wrap this whole thing in a console.log so you can kind of see live what we're working with. So we're going to pass everything to a process images function. And all this is going to do, this process images, is it's going to take in some item, which will be the first image in the array. Well, in this case, the cloned last image as the first image in the array. And for each of these things, we just want to return an actual string that looks like HTML. So we'll say the source is equal to, and this will be in backticks here so that we can say item.url. If you remember, that's how our JSON file is organized. We have each item has a URL and an alt tag. So item.url, and then we'll add the alt. And this will be equal to item.alt. If I save it, it's trying to console.low. That doesn't exist. All right, so you see we've got a long string of text, and that's all it is right now is just text. That's why we actually want to make it the inner HTML, which will convert it essentially to HTML. And if I uncomment this and now save it, you see we actually have our images stacked right after the others. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to the end. And you see this image here is our first image, and it shows here. The first image in the array is actually the cloned last image. Sorry if that made you sick, jumping back and forth. All right, now what we need to do eventually is offset this to the left. So we're going to write a function called move slides, and we'll do that in just a second. For now, let's go ahead and remember to write a catch here, since we never really finished this. So catch, we're going to catch any errors, and when those happen, we'll just say console.error. There has been a problem with your fetch operation. And then we'll add in here the error. Okay, that should work just fine for us. There has been a problem with your fetch operation. Move slides is not defined. See, I told you it would work. All right, we'll come in here now and let's go ahead and offset everything. So we'll say move slides, and let's write this function. Now, in order to know which slide that we're currently on, we need to declare a variable up here, and we're going to call this let slide index equal 1, so the first image. And then in this move slides function, we can say slide.style.transform, and then in backticks here, we'll say translate x. And what we want to do is set it to negative, and then let's go ahead and grab that slide index. So slide index times 100. All right, and then we'll do a percentage on the outside. This needs to be in actual times, just like that. Okay, so if I save this, it actually jumps it over this way. Now, what is happening? All right, let's go ahead and add some stuff to the CSS just so you can see what's going on. So let's look for the slide. All right, right here. So let's say border 2 pixels, solid red. Okay, so the div is actually being pulled over this way. And when I take this overflow hidden off, you see it's hidden it essentially. Let's put it back on. All right, so you see it over this way. Now, as we are moving this, let's change this slide index to 2. It moves it one more. If I change it to 0, it's going to be right in the middle. Change it to, I don't know, 4. It's going to be way off here that you can't even see it. So it's just dragging this whole kind of train around. If I jump back over this way, this is the div. The div is essentially right here. And as I move all the rest of these, let's grab all these again. As I move them over, we're going to start them at right here, translated over 100% of that div container. As I move these over one at a time, it's just going to pull the div all the way over and expose whatever is in this long trail of the flex children. All right, so we've now just said we want it to be 100% left of its own width, which should bring the second image directly into view. So that's why we're moving the div and not the images inside. Let me go ahead and come back in here. Let's remove this red border. And then I'll come in here back to the JavaScript here. And because we're already here in this move slides function, let's go ahead and work on this progress bar. All we're going to do is use our CSS variables we set up last time and update those live based on whatever the slide index is. Let's change this back to 1. So we jump to the proper section. And then we're going to come in here. The first thing we actually need to do is to grab the slides array itself to know how many images we have, because we haven't actually done that yet. And you can't do it up front because it has to load first, but it has loaded by this point. So we can say const slides array is equal to, and let's just spread it into an array here, slide, that's the thing that we actually do have on the page from the start, .query selector all, and we're just going to select all image tags inside of it. So now we've got the slides array, so that's the actual images that are in the DOM rather than just the ones from the file we received back. And let's see, this needs to be on the outside. And then we're going to set the root.style, which means we need to grab the root up top here. So we'll say const root is equal to document.querySelector. We're going to grab the root, and that way we can update the style on the root. So we'll say .set property, and the property we're going to set is our slide progress. This is what we set up last time. And we're going to say that this needs to be equal to 100 divided by, now this math gets a little hairy here, so follow me, the slides array, so that's the full number we have, so 100 divided by the number we have, dot length, that would give us our full number if we did -1, but we're actually going to move it -3, and I'll show you why in just a second. We're going to take all of that, add a ending back to here and not there, and then we'll say times our slide index -1, and then we will do percentage here and close this off. Did I do that wrong? I definitely did that wrong. Okay, let's see. Well, I never added our closing bracket, and then I didn't add this final parenthesis. I think that's it. Yeah, there we go. Okay, that's one of the things I like about V is it throws up a huge error, just kind of like Parcel does as well. All right, so let's change this and see if this is actually working live. So if I jump to the second one, it actually goes to the second one, to the fourth one, to the fifth one. It goes almost all the way across, and to the sixth one, it goes all the way there. Okay, so let's talk about what's going on with this progression bar as far as this math is concerned. So how many items do we have in this array? Well, let's figure that out by console logging the slides array. So console.log slides array, and you see we've got 8 images. Now you might remember we actually only have 6 images, but we've cloned 2. So what I'm asking here is I'm saying, hey, I want 100% of the entire width. All right, so whatever that is, and then I want to chop it up. I want to divide it not by 8 and not even by 6, because I want the first one to have nothing, and then I want the final one to be fully across. So I actually want 5 slots. So by saying, hey, I want the full array minus 3, gets rid of the first one and the 2 clones, which gives me 5. All right, hopefully that makes sense. So I'm saying, hey, I want to split this first of all into 5 spots. Then what I want to do is I want to take whatever the slide index is, and I want to multiply it times that to get the amount, kind of the stage that I'm at. And by saying -1 here, we're again offsetting the first image to make sure it starts at 0, and then it will go all the way across. If that math doesn't totally make sense, don't worry about it. It works, and so let's just move on, but hopefully that helps a little bit. Okay, so if I load this now, we know this is the first image. If I change this to 2, it updates and shows me the progress bar as we expect. Okay, so we've got them stacked up here. Now what we want to do is be able to work on these event handlers where when we click on this, it actually will move one direction or the other. So let's come down here and let's write some event handlers. So we'll say click right button and click left button. All right, event handlers it is. Let's give ourselves a little more space. We're going to write this just in line here. So we'll say document.querySelector, and then let's go ahead and grab the slider button right. And we'll add the event listener right here, like I mentioned. We'll say when it's clicked, then we want to go ahead and do a few things here. Okay, first of all, we're going to just write a move handler function that will run in a second. Now I would do this inline, but we're going to do one more thing in a little bit. So let's copy this down and do the same thing, except this will be for the left. I could use the shared class and then said like if it has left, then do this, but I think it's just as clean to do this, and I don't know that it's any less code or any more code this way. So let's go ahead and now we need to actually say, hey, let's handle the move when they click it. Let's come back up here and we'll say move when clicked or something like that. Function move handler. We're going to pass in a direction, and probably the easiest thing to do is just to use it one direction or the other. So let's say right. So whenever right runs, we'll pass in right. Whenever left runs, we won't pass in anything. And then let's say slide.style.transition. And the first thing we're going to do is add a transition here. So we'll say transform 450 milliseconds ease in and out. So in other words, we're adding a transition on the transform property whenever we click, and then we're going to remove it when it gets to the end and we need to jump all the way over. And I'll show you how that works here in a second if that doesn't make sense. So we'll say if direction does not equal right, then we'll say slide index is minus equals to 1. So in other words, we're going to say subtract 1 from the slide index. Otherwise, we want the slide index to be plus equal 1. All right, so add 1 if it doesn't have right. Okay, now we're getting an error down here. See slider button right, 48, document.querySelector. I have a double document. You probably saw that a while ago. Okay, that should work now. So when I click here, it should be updating the index. Now, we don't have anything to show us that, so right now you'll have to take my word for it, or we could just write our move slides function, and now when we click, it should actually move them over just like that. All right, cool. We need to go ahead and remove the overflow now that we know what we're doing. Or put it back on, I guess. Where is that? Okay, right here. Okay, so now it hides it, and as I move, and it transitions it over all the way, and that progress bar is updating to just as we'd expect. Now we get to this last one, and we click, number 1 is just going to keep going. All right, so that's the first problem. The second problem will be the transition once we get around to that. Let's start by writing it all the way up here in our move slides function. So we're going to write a little if statement that will determine which slide is the current index. So we'll look at the slide index and we'll ask, first of all, if it's equal to 0. That would mean if it's the very first slide, which is technically a clone of the last slide. So we'll say slide.style.transition is going to be equal to none. So if that's the case, we want to say that the slide index is equal to slides array.length minus 1. And we've grabbed the slides array up top here so we can use that here. Now if we do -1, it'll actually, let's come over here. So here we go. Now we want to jump to the beginning. Let's see what is going on. Well, I didn't put an equal sign, so that it doesn't help. Okay, let's come over here. Now it'll jump all the way back to now the first one. All right, so that's kind of not helpful because of the movement, but at least it's getting to the right spot. We can write another if statement then here and say if slide index is equal to slides array dot length -1, then slide index is going to be equal to 1, which is the starting slide. Okay, so here we go. We're here now. When we click here, it should actually jump to the same image at the end. So I'll keep jumping this way, come here, and now it should go to this one, and this is the cloned one, and it should jump all the way back to the same slide. Okay, so something's going on because it's not actually jumping to the right slide. So slide index 0, okay, I think I see the problem here. This needs to be length 2. All right, let's refresh this. We go this way. This should jump to the same image. This is getting squished too. All right, so we've got some work to do. Let's see what's going on here. First of all, this needs to be, let's see, this needs an object fit of cover. All right, let's make sure that we added that. I was fairly certain we'd added that last time. Somehow we didn't. All right, object fit of cover. Okay, so now they should be correct. Okay, the other thing we need to do is let's go ahead and now we thought we knew what we were doing. We didn't. Let's take this off. I apologize. We zoom back out. Let's check to see what's going on. Let's refresh the page. This is offset by 1, so this is the div itself. Let's just double check that. Yeah, that's the div, and this is the first slide. This is the second slide, which is the first item in our array. See there, image 1. Okay, so let's go this way. We go 1. It's now changed the slide index. We jump over this way. Let's see. So what do we do? So slides array. Okay, I'm still not seeing the problem. So let's go ahead and console log. This kind of stuff happens all the time. So just so you know, that's part of the business. Okay, let's come in here and let's double check that everything's updating as we'd expect. So come here, it's saying now that it's 6, so that when I jump, it should jump over this way. And let's go back this way. It should say it's 0 when I get here. And it says, or should say it's 1. That's what we updated it to. So let's see, slides 1. Let's change this back to 1 and see what happens when we do that. Okay, we come here. It's saying it's 7, but it's not jumping to 7. I think let's cut our losses and we'll come back. We're going to have to fix this. It was working on 2 kind of, so let's leave it there for now because we've got another problem, which is all that jumping about. We can remove the transition only when we hit one of these, and that will actually help us here. So we could say slide, slide.style.transition. And down here we had transform. Now what we're going to say is it needs to be none. And we'll do that on both of these here. So that in either way, if we're moving here, it should actually remove it altogether when we jump. Come here, it should remove it all together when we jump. Now it is removing it, but it's removing it before the transition itself is done. And that actually brings into view something else we need to think about. Let's actually take all of this. Actually, let's go ahead and grab the slides array too, because we're going to need to redeclare that down below. And let's move this out of this move slides function. And let's come down here because what we want to do is actually set up an event listener on slides itself. So we'll say slides.add event listener. We want to listen for transition end. And whenever that happens, we're going to come in here and we're going to do several things. First of all, we're just going to copy in what we had up above. Now we don't need this set property whole thing here, so we can get rid of that, but we do need our slides array again. And then let's go ahead and do this. And then after each of these, and this isn't slides, but slide, after each of these, then we'll go ahead and just say move slides and run it like that. Let's copy this down. And now when we come in this way, you see it's actually already jumped over back to the beginning. So it's actually working as we expect. Come over here, same thing. Let's see if it works this way. So I think that may have just been our problem. I had written it to be in its own little event listener, and it wasn't liking what we did up top. So yeah, you see what it's actually doing? We get to the very end. So this is the last one. We click over, Oh, I went too fast. That brings up another problem I'll show you in a second. Immediately jumps to the cloned image. Let's go ahead and apply that CSS or remove that overflow one more time. Come back this way. We refresh, we move over this way. Everything should be working properly. Now I've zoomed out a little bit here, so it's kind of messing with stuff. Okay, so I'll come in here, we slide, we're going this way. It actually has now jumped back to the beginning one. Come back this way, and it's sliding just like you'd expect, one after the other. And we've got a couple things really quickly to fix that are just kind of UX, UI kind of things. First of all, as you see this kind of progress bar sliding, it just slides and slides. Actually, let's go this way so you can see it. When it gets here, it then just disappears real quick. And then on each of these, it's not really transitioning nicely, it's just snapping. And I want it to kind of match what we've got going on with the slides themselves moving. So after the transition, we'll actually update our variable again for the slide progress transition. Actually, I don't think we updated it before, we just did slide progress. Let's go ahead and grab this though, just so we don't have to retype quite as much. We'll come in here and we're going to update the slide progress transition this time. Let's go ahead and write another little a little ternary in here. So let's ask a question. If slide index is equal to slides array dot length minus 2, all right, so if it's the last true image before the final clone, then we want to change after the transition, we want to change the transition variable here to none. Otherwise, we want to say we want it to be all 200 milliseconds, and let's just come up here and grab it from what we had set here. So all 200 milliseconds, same thing. So otherwise, we want it to be here, and we went ahead and declared it up top there, so the first time we run it, it'll automatically work. And now we come over here and they should slide. And that doesn't seem to be working for me, so let's come up here and just double check that this slide progress is actually working. All right, so this needs to be Bezier, which means this is probably messed up too. All right, and we'll come back over this way. Okay, let's try this again. Oh, and you know what? Because we copied it over, we forgot to remove this percentage sign. And I think you see the problem. This needs to be a comma. So I just messed that up earlier in our last video trying to probably talk and type at the same time. So we'll save here, come on. There we go. It slides like it's supposed to. So it slides and then it gets to the end and it removes it and just jumps all the way back. So let's try that again. Comes in here, it should remove it. You see it moves it to none there and then jumps all the way back to the beginning. And I think that should work. Maybe we should make this 1. So it gets to the final one and then it removes it. Let's try that. So it comes here after the transition here, then it takes it off, then it adds it back in. Okay, good enough for me. Now there's something else we're going to run into UX-wise. If I come in here and I start clicking really fast, it eventually kind of spazzes out and I can't do anything anymore. So the problem is we need to actually also wait for the transition to be done before we let them use these buttons again. So let's come up top here and we're going to declare another, or actually Boolean here. We'll just say let is moving and we'll set that to false. And now we can update this Boolean in several different places. So if I come over here, first place we're going to do it is in this move handler. So we'll say we're going to set this now to true. And then let's jump all the way back down here to the bottom. After the transition has ended, then we're going to set this back to false. And then finally, we need to write a little if statement here. The if statement will just say if is moving. So if that's true, essentially, then we just want to return and jump out of this. In other words, it will not let us click that button over if it's still moving. So if it's moving, it's not even going to run this event handler. So if I come over here and click as fast as I can, you see even if I click as fast as I possibly can, each time it's waiting till the transition is done to move this back to false. So we move this along and it's only going to go as fast as it's capable of doing. We had one other UX thing to add, and that is the keyboard arrows. Now, I probably wouldn't do this on just a slider in the middle of a page like this, unless I had an intersection observer that like was another check or something like that. But just for the sake of doing it, let's go ahead and do it because we've got everything else already set up for it. So we'll come in here and we're going to write a keyboard arrow handler or something like that. So on the window, we're going to listen for an event, and the event we'll listen for is key up. And let's go ahead and grab the event itself And then we'll say, just like before, if is moving. If that's true, then we want to return. So same kind of check we ran on clicking the arrows. And then we'll go ahead and write a little switch statement here, and we'll just say we'll take the e.key, so the name of the key itself, and we'll write a few cases. So we'll say if it's arrow left, then go ahead and do our move handler. We don't have a direction when it's left, and we'll break from this. And then let's copy this down 2 more times. Here will be the case of, not the case, but just default. And we'll just break from that. This arrow right, though, whenever it's arrow right, we'll pass on here right, which is the same thing we did for our right mouse button. So now if I move my arrows on my keyboard, push my arrows on my keyboard, it should transition just fine. I can also come here and click. All right, that is a completed project to my eye. And you can see how it is fully responsive because the way we set it up earlier, it'll never take up more than 100% of the view height, whatever that is. But by default, I think it's like 500 or something like that we set up. On a mobile device, you just click. We don't have swiping on this. Maybe I will do that on another video, but we'll come in here, and on the desktop, you can either click or use your keyboard arrows, and you can see how this progress bar updates automatically. Now, I've got the code in the description, so you can check that out if you get stuck at all. If you have something else that you would do, let me know. This is really fun to kind of work out how you might do this and visually kind of laying it out, hopefully showing you that Figma was a big help. You can also check out the live code. I'll add that too. All right, enough talking. Thanks so much for watching, and happy coding.